All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Strategy's first online webinar. Hope everyone is doing fine during these tough times. I am Seraphim Zorbas, Head of Marketing, and I will go through some housekeeping rules before we begin. The webinar will last an hour, and we will welcome your questions, which will be addressed towards the end of the session. Feel free to post your questions in the Q&A panel on the bottom of your screen during the course of the discussion. You can also upvote another participant's question. Thank you for your patience and time. I now give the floor to Lida, who will be moderating the discussion.
Thank you, Seraphim. Welcome everyone to WISE's webinar on sustainability. We're very excited to host our first online webinar on this very, very timely topic. Today's discussion aims to help shift the conversation from what's wrong with the management of sustainability to what is possible. We hope to inspire organizations to adopt radically more powerful and purposeful practices. So without further ado, allow me to present our distinguished guests at the panel. I'm delighted to be joined by 4 sustainability champions, each one of them being a pioneer in his or her sector. Starting with Christos Stamatis. Christos is the CEO of Stevia Hellas and represents the primary sector in the panel today. His company is a large-scale producer of stevia in Europe. And for those who do not know, stevia is a plant which acts as a natural substitute to sugar. Our next speaker is Nick Koskoletos, CFA. Nick has over 15 years of experience in capital markets in Greece and abroad on both the asset management and the investment banking side. And he is currently the Chief Financial Officer of the Athens Exchange Group. And last but not least, our 2 speakers from the manufacturing sector, Maria Alexiou, who has been leading the CSR and sustainability initiatives of Titan Cement Group since 2003. Maria is also chair at the board. She also chairs the board of directors of CSR Hellas Business Network, is a board member of CSR Europe, and is also a member of the EFRAG task force. Finally, Hub Sabelkuls, who just recently retired, I think 2 weeks ago, retired from Philip Morris International, where he enjoyed a very fulfilling career for over 26 years, ultimately serving as PMI's first Chief Sustainability Officer. In the last 5 years, Hub has been critical in PMI's transformation to create a smoke-free future. So, Hub, I wonder whether you can take the first question, which really relates with the meaning of sustainability. What does sustainability mean and imply for a company? For example, in PMI's case, it implied an immense transformation. To me, at least, it looks like an oxymoron for a cigarette company to promise a smoke-free future. So can you tell us how you arrived at this new disruptive purpose?
Thank you for this question, Lida, and thank you very much for inviting me to this panel, and good afternoon to everybody. Well, the question is a good one, especially if you ask it to a tobacco manufacturer. I mean, as we all know, smoking is extremely harmful to health. Many of our consumers suffer from the consequences of smoking. And so therefore, you wonder, how can a tobacco company be sustainable? And in fact, it all starts with materiality, which is you need to understand what is the biggest impact that you have as a company on society. What do consumers and the public at large expect from you for now, but also longer term? And for that reason, at least at PMI, we for a long time said, look, we can be as green as we want to be. We can be the most diverse company. We will never be sustainable unless we do something about the product and make it less harmful than cigarettes. So for that reason, for many years, we never spoke about sustainability publicly, although we were doing certain things already with regard to labor practice and so forth, until we found a really good alternative to cigarettes, i.e., smoking is extremely harmful, as I said before. Consumers enjoy nicotine. So how can you provide a product that is providing the enjoyment to the consumers without being as harmful as cigarettes? And as soon as we found that better alternative, which was a heated tobacco product developed over the last 20 years, but when we launched it in 2015, we realized this is the product that can actually change the whole company and change, in fact, the whole industry. And this is actually a product that allows us to be sustainable, because as soon as we can address our most material topic, i.e. the impact of the product on the health of the consumer, then you can really be a sustainable company. Like I said, if half of your consumers die of smoking cigarettes, but you are the greenest or the most diverse company, I don't think you can really be sustainable. So sustainability for me always starts with the most material topics, and that is often the product. And for me, it's also, you mentioned it's a big transformation. Yes, it's an enormous transformation. I mean, we have approximately 150 million consumers. It will take a lot of time until all of them are switched to better alternatives. But it meant changing the product, changing the supply chain, changing the factories, everything. So it's a huge transformation that we started 5 years ago. Yeah, that's, I think, what all companies should be doing. Focus on the most material impacts. Can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
You're right. Sorry. I keep the word materiality. It sounds like a simple word, but when it comes to materiality assessment, it becomes a bit more complicated. So maybe I should, that would give me a bridge to go on with Maria. I wonder if you can tackle the next question with regards to what, if you consider that there are any prerequisites for a company to develop its sustainability strategy, like, for example, is materiality a prerequisite, and how do we go about that? And if you were to advise a large or even a medium-sized company on sustainability practices, where would you suggest they start from?
For sure, it's about materiality, and it is about understanding your impact. Actually, it is understanding each and everyone's impact, because even as ourselves as individuals, we do have an impact. So acknowledgement of our impacts, of the impacts of our decisions and our behavior is fundamental. And focusing, of course, of what is more material in order to see how we will improve these impacts and turn them from negative to positive, and this is about the transition described already. It is also about leadership, because it takes a serious commitment to make this type of self-assessment and understand how you yourself as an organization has an impact, and how this impact creates or contributes to different kind of material issues that are part of the concerns of the society around us, part of the concerns of our stakeholders, either in the customer's side or in the supplier side or in the shareholder side. And actually, because we started talking about CSR in the late 90s, beginning of 2000, and it was the first time that we raised the issue of stakeholder. Allow me to say that now we have started talking about the stakeholder capitalism, a capitalism that will acknowledge what the negative and positive impacts may be, and how we really proactively find the best solutions to reverse negative to positive at the end of the day. So in this case, even for a small and medium-sized enterprise who is now building its own, let's say, future vision and growth process, it is fundamental to understand the way we operate, in the environment we operate, in the ecosystem we operate, what type of impacts creates in the short, in the medium, and in the long term. And for SMEs, this seems to be more complicated as they are not equally exposed to different aspects of the current environment. So their own understanding of impacts might be not easily perceived, as in the case of a large enterprise like Philip Morris or like Titan Group, who are more exposed, who have more, let's say, senses to receive feedback from stakeholders and to understand what it is material for business and what it is material for the stakeholders that they are serving. For SMEs, then, I would suggest to join forces today with others, to learn from others, to start working on more collaborative efforts, either driven by peer groups within the same industry or by cross-sectoral initiatives, because this will be the only way for them in such complicated environment to perceive what is changing, to understand what is changing in the needs of stakeholders, and to see their own opportunity within this big transition, allow me to say. And I think because SMEs are flexible, are mainly family-based business, and they have values, family values as a bond, and they focus on some specific objectives, they have an opportunity. If they learn fast from the leaders and from the ones who are leading changes, they can adapt. But it takes also, apart from the leadership commitment I said in the beginning, collaboration. That's the other magic, let's say, word for me when we are talking about sustainability.
We'll come back to collaboration. Thank you, Maria. Turning to Christos, you're a small size company in the agri-food sector, well, relatively smaller than PMI and Titan, I would guess. And you're the only cooperative in Greece that is engaged in a sustainability plan addressing, if I'm not mistaken, 15 out of the 17 UN SDGs. So tell us a bit what made you follow this trajectory, and one thing I particularly want to know from you, given that you're a smaller company, was the financial burden or cost of this initiative in any way a concern to you in this journey? Christos? Christos? I think we lost Christos. Yeah, he will probably re-enter. Maybe he has some technical problem. Should we go on with our fourth panelist, Nick? Can I address the next question to you until Christos joins us again? I would like to move on to ESG a bit, and we all know that, you know, in simple terms, ESG refers to the environmental, social, and governance criteria that help evaluate companies on their progress in sustainability. So I wonder, Nick, whether you want to have a go on the topic of ESG reporting. And we know that Athex Group has recently published a very comprehensive guide that helps companies get an understanding of ESG reporting. Can you tell us if this guide has been helpful and give us some color as to where Greek companies stand, especially asset managers, funds, let's say, where do they stand in terms of understanding ESG?
Okay, hi Lida, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here, and good afternoon to everyone. Now, yes, it's true. Part of, so the Athens Stock Exchange is part of the Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative from the UN, so we've endorsed that. So part of our obligation, if you will, being part of the solution, being advocates of sustainability in order to assist and be a catalyst and draw upon the experiences of more people to endorse and be an ambassador for sustainability. That's how the whole idea with the guide came out, because you spoke about materiality, and I think it's very key to the whole issue of people reading about ESG and then getting confused through many aspects of it. So one thing that the guide does do is, aside from highlighting core metrics that are applicable to all, and then going into more details, and there's the issue of materiality, of having a predefined concept for those that have undertaking the effort to assess what is material for them, to use what is out there in order to retrofit materiality to depending on your sector. So that we have found that has been very helpful for smaller entities, if you will, but we even had one of the larger caps in Greece make reference in the annual report to the ESG guide. So that was, it speaks miles to the fact that we have had an increasing amount of interaction, and even the fact that going from the data selection that we did in 2018 to what we are doing now for the 2019 numbers, to see how much more receptive the industry in terms of corporate Greece, agnostic to size, just focusing on what is listed on the exchange, it seems that there's an increasing amount of engagement on this matter. So it's either people that have already reported and have been doing so just because there was the non-financial reporting directive that was kind of catered towards the larger companies, and as mentioned before from both speakers, that larger companies, because of their association, because of their diversity, because of the industry that they operate in, have had the chance of being exposed to matters of sustainability much earlier, just because of their environment. And that's why we see that more of the larger companies have made much more progress on the issues of sustainability. But the smaller ones are coming along as well. They're asking, they're trying to engage. And I think because of the effort to operate in a much more competitive environment, that's one of the aftermath of the Greek Great Recession, is companies understand that they need to be a lot more competitive, and to be much more competitive, they have to start addressing matters of sustainability, because that is something that is very important for stakeholders. So it's the matter of understanding, of transitioning from the concept of what was at a particular time maximizing shareholder value as being the sole purpose of a corporate, to now being maximizing long-term value that is a much more encompassing definition of stakeholders. So I think, Maria, I will be taking you up on that stakeholder capitalism expression. I think it is a very key expression that encompasses the change that has happened. The fact that there's 40 trillion euros under management that are part of that are encompassing ESG in the investment decision process, I think that change has already happened. So it's just a matter of understanding that change, and those that have not geared to start gearing to that in order to be competitive, either remain competitive, and always being able to have access to capital at economic terms.
Hub, if I may ask on that front, was it difficult for PMI to attract investors in recent years, given the significant growth of ESG investors? I mean, Nick just mentioned the 40 trillion, and forecasts have it that 95% of global assets will be ESG driven as of 2030, which is almost here. So was it difficult, or is it difficult for PMI to attract investors, given that it's a listed company in London and elsewhere, I think? What implications arise from the fact that funds divest in tobacco companies?
PMI is listed in New York, by the way, not in London, but it doesn't matter. Look, I think today people buy shares in PMI predominantly because of the good financial returns, because of the dividends. That's the main part of the shareholdership, as well as people who buy index funds. So those are the passive instruments, basically. I think when you look at, of course, I completely agree with Nick that ESG investing is a very important trend, and it's growing certainly in Europe, but also in the United States. But I also think that by and large, ESG investment is still a very, let's say, immature. It's not yet a mature, let's say, there's not yet a mature approach to it. It's not, there are no real standards to it today. And what you see is that many of the investors, ESG investors, they apply simple exclusions. So they exclude coal, they exclude tobacco. And that's something which is quite easy to market and to sell to consumers. But it doesn't really necessarily achieve any impact, because let me give you a simple example outside of the tobacco domain. There were two large energy companies in Europe, ENGIE and RWE in Germany. And they were both generating electricity with a diverse set of, let's say, resources, coal, nuclear, and so forth. And because of pressure, ENGIE sold all its coal business and became, so to speak, a green company overnight, and all the investors were happy. But actually what happened is they simply sold their coal business to US private equity, and the coal plants are still there. So, sometimes ESG investing, when done in a simplistic way, doesn't really solve problems. It simply shifts them to somebody else. And I think this is something that needs to be increasingly recognized. And I see it happening because instead of going for simple exclusion, more and more the world is going towards ESG integration, where you recognize that not all companies are the same. So take tobacco companies. Not all tobacco companies are the same. And if you want to achieve impact and change, what you should do is actually invest in those companies that are transforming rather than in those that are not transforming, and thereby achieve positive change. So this is, I think, a way where financial, let's say, investments can really help to drive positive change in the world.
Okay, I'll keep this in mind later on when we discuss a bit about legislation and the role of policy making. Welcome back, Christos. We missed you for a while. Just repeating.
My daughter stole my Wi-Fi, maybe, and I moved to another floor of my house, so it's better. It's more secure now.
No problem, no problem. Well, the question that we started asking you before we missed you was whether, I mean, the fact that you as a small company, as opposed to the other panelists on the table here, the virtual table, you managed to have a sustainability plan addressing 15 out of the 17 UN SDGs. And was the financial dimension in any way a concern to your initiative and your decision to take this journey onwards?
No, not at all. And to be honest, as we have discussed many times, Lida, we are only 7 employees in our cooperative. And our decision to devote one of these employees and to make it as a head of sustainability was really tough, because it came from the sales department. So it was a really tough decision, but it was something that we should do and we should act to it. But before that, let put the things in the right order, and let's see how we concluded in this sustainability for all plan framework. I have to make clear that these days, all of us were talking about sustainability and about CSR. So both CSR and corporate sustainability focus on helping companies to run in a way that allows them to be ethically profitable. But there are some differences between corporate social responsibility and corporate sustainability. And I have to make it clear, I feel. First of all, CSR often looks backward and reflects on what a company has done to contribute to society. From the other hand, corporate sustainability looks forward and develops a sustainable strategy for the future. Also, CSR initiatives are often coming from the opinion formers. From the other hand, corporate sustainability looks at the whole value chain, from end customers to the stakeholders. And I will speak later about the stakeholder, what we're meaning when we're talking about stakeholders. The management team. The CSR gets managed by communications teams, while sustainability formed by stakeholders and managed by stakeholders. And this is how everything started some time ago. I realized that our stakeholders asking for more corporate sustainability. And a few months ago, we launched the Sustainability for All framework, which intends to accelerate the evolution of our cooperative through sustainable and profitable growth that delivers value to all of our stakeholders, to our customers, to our farmers, to our shareholders and investors, of course, to our staff and to our communities, and of course to our planet. So, as you said before, the framework's initiatives, the Sustainability for All, directly contributes to 17 of the 17 SDGs. And this framework focuses on three main areas. The sustainable farming. We have increased a lot the number of organic farmers. We start investigating regenerative farming and methods and how we can preserve and restore biodiversity. We are also focusing on sustainable products by measuring CO2 emissions of all of our products and applying on compensation methods. By the end of this year, 55% of our SKUs are plastic free. And by 2030, 100% of our SKUs will be plastic free and recyclable packaging. And the last and the third pillar is the people well-being, farmers and employees. As the European Green Deal said, leaving no one behind. Our farmers and employees are the backbone of our cooperative. So we have to make sure we preserve their well-being by achieving fair buying prices from the farmers and continuous education programs for them, because we have to educate farmers, but also for when we're talking about consumers, and or maybe the right word is customers, not consumers, is the public adaptation to a healthier lifestyle by offering them a wide range of enough, tasteful, and quality products. So this is our Sustainability for All framework that we are working on, and we are very, very proud of that, because it's something very crucial for our future, the future of our cooperative, and the future of our land.
Yeah, you mentioned the EU Green Deal, and we'll turn into that in a moment. But before turning to the legislation, let's say, I would like to stay on another subject a bit, which relates with metrics and standards and frameworks. And maybe Maria would like to take take on this question. I wonder, how should a company build its measurement practice in a way that makes sense? Because, you know, from the outside, we keep hearing all these acronyms which represent and reflect standards and frameworks like SAS, GRI, PRI, and so on and so forth. And it can be confusing for someone who looks at it from the outside. So again, for a newcomer in this journey, where do you start from in your metrics, Maria?
Thank you, Lida. Taking advantage of what already has been said, allow me to use something I learned from a very wise man and a leader in CSR and sustainability, Theodore Papalexopoulos. He kept on saying, it's not what you say it is what you do. So it doesn't matter if you call it CSR or sustainability, corporate citizenship. There are so many different words to name it. What it counts is what you do. And actually, by our actions, we can have the change we expect to see around us, as Gandhi was saying, another wise man. So today, we have more than 380 reporting frameworks, only reporting frameworks, and allow me to say that we have another 220 actually ratings regarding sustainability and CSR. 380 that was counted in 2018 for reporting sustainability, and another 220 for rating sustainability. It's too much. And allow me to say, from the side of a company that has invested a lot to build integrity, transparency, to provide comparable data, information that are meaningful, related to material issues, to be consistent and to be reliable in sharing this information with stakeholders, it turns out to become a nightmare, and allow me to say the burden, particularly for SMEs, to cope with all this is really too big. For this reason, this type of guidance that, in the case of Athens Stock Exchange, help companies to see, first of all, how they can use the standards. So a guide is really good because it helps you to understand which type of standards may be more applicable in your case, in your industry, in your size, first of all, because that was also true. And it was said before, one size does not fit all. Each company has a different impact, operates in diverse conditions. So there is not a recipe really. It is actually the company to find its own way in this evolution and business transformation that was already described. Now, working before a new wave of regulations that are coming from the side of European Union, aligned with the new Green Deal and the European policy on sustainable finance, we see a big change in what will become mandatory from now on and what will be expected from companies to disclose regularly, to communicate with all stakeholders and not only investors, and to focus so as to build trust, because this is the ultimate objective. If we ask ourselves why we do all that, why we need all that, is because we need trust, and there is no future growth if we don't trust each other and if we don't work together to pursue our future objectives. In this sense, we are waiting to see now that the revisiting outcomes from the existing directive on non-financial reporting that was so far really related to large entities and the companies listed in the stock exchange, but from now on, it will be expected both from large entities and from smaller entities like Stevia, for example, to build their own, let's say, business plan, future business plan, taking other considerations, the ESG attributes. Allow me to use this term, attributes, because in a recent announcement by Morgan Stanley Capital Investment, the so-called and so well-known MSCI, a new CSR score will come out. They will call it CSR, not corporate sustainability. And they have already defined that they will assess corporate performance across specific attributes. And these are what you do about your communities, what you do about diversity, what you do about your employee relations and engaging with employees, what you do about the environment in general, not only regarding biodiversity, it's not the only issue. Pollution is another issue. Water is another issue. There are many issues. Some are material for some companies, some are material for some other companies. Product is very important to acknowledge that our products in the future and our services to the customer will be sustainable and responsible. And of course, human rights. On top of everything else, particularly also with the influence we experience right now from the pandemic, health becomes a top priority for all, and it is part of the human rights agenda. So it is another attribute that we have to acknowledge and understand and to see how we influence. Yeah. All this will be part of the annual report, but not only. It will be part of our communication with the capital lenders, will be part of our communication with our customers, will be part of our communication with other key stakeholders. In one way or another, it seems that either we call it CSR or we call it corporate sustainability, this will become our future license to operate. A new form of license, but it's going to be like our license to operate in the future.
Yeah. Who Maria mentioned touched upon the S and G part of EFG, meaning the social and governance, let's say, dimensions of sustainability. And I do know that Philip Morris has been particularly attentive to these two areas. I mean, public debate, when we think of sustainability, immediately, automatically, we only think of environment and climate change and carbon neutral targets, etc. But it's not only that. Can you give us some color as to what does your S&G activity involve as PMI? As ex-PMI?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I think based on our materiality analysis, we looked at what are the most important topics, not just with regard to the product, as I talked about, or the environment, also social and governance. And maybe to highlight two of them. In the social area, one major issue for many agricultural companies involved in agriculture is child labor in agricultural areas. So we buy tobacco in many countries around the world, also in Greece, but also in developing countries, Malawi, Mozambique, places like that. And child labor remains a major issue. And so that has been on our radar screen for more than 10 years in a very visible way. And we've, I think, developed over that time a very detailed and profound program. And the concept is basically that we have many field technicians who visit the farms with whom we have contracts 5 times per year, typically. We have contracts with all these farmers, and in these contracts, of course, apart from certain, let's say, environmental standards or the use of for example, pesticides, how that should be done, we also have standards with regard to social norms, i.e. not having children working at the farm. But we are taking it now one step further because we recognize that very often child labor, the root cause of that problem is insufficient income for the farmers, and therefore we are looking at making sure that farmers have a living income, because unless farmers have sufficient income, they will often rely not on hiring people to help them, but on children helping them on the farm. So this is a very important area, social topic for many companies involved in agricultural businesses. When you look at governance, it's often to do, in our case, with how do you operate in terms of commercializing your product. If you commercialize tobacco products, which are addictive and harmful, you need to be very careful that you avoid, let's say, marketing to kids or, underage, consumers. And therefore, there are very strict norms of who can we sell to, how do we market these products, and also the enforcement of that. And those are two areas in this S and the G pillar that are very important for our company. But again, like I said, it's all based on materiality. This is the start of any good sustainability strategy.
Yeah. Nick, again, on the governance side of things, we only had the transposition of the 2017 EU directive on corporate governance in Greece. I believe in July, there was the law voted. So I was wondering whether you can tell us where we stand in terms of board responsibility vis-a-vis sustainability, at least in the listed companies in Afex Group. Is there a level playing field there, and how do you follow or monitor the companies in any way in that front?
So, okay, we did have the transposition of the legislation that you mentioned. It's the renowned corporate governance law that we saw in July. Now, do we monitor? Yes, just because we want to have a better picture as to what is happening, what are the moving parts with regards to our listed companies. But I think one of the most important things here to talk about is, at the end of the day, it comes back to the whole sustainability issue and the governance. It's a matter of accountability. See, one of the biggest, being a listed company, you need to speak to, amongst other people, your shareholders as well. So to tie it with the asset managers that have endorsed PRI, they themselves need to be asking the tough questions. They themselves need to be pushing. So it's not a matter of ticking boxes. Coming back to what Maria and Christos and who mentioned, like, it's endorsing, feeling the matter of sustainability and understanding the impact that you're having. So when you have the institutional investors that need to be, and because we have this whole EU taxonomy now as well that's coming, or that people will need to start reporting on. They need to be they need to be more vocal in asking those questions and pushing the ones that have been allocated, because the recipients of their capital need to live up to the new standards. So I think there is much that could be done, has been done. So it's just not a matter of legislation. It's never about legislation. Sustainability, if it were just to adopt to legislation, then it's a tick box. It's a ticking the box exercise.
That's an interesting.
To really understand it, Christos mentioned it before. Like, he feels it came from his sales department. Like, in order to be in business, in order for those that allocate capital to have it allocated in a sustainable way, given this stakeholder capitalism that we're part of, legislation itself, yes, it helps to provide the guidance, but it would be anathema if it all comes back to just abiding to legislation. It's to understand that it's not it's not about ticking boxes. It's to really become and endorsing that, to understand that your shareholders want you to do that, that your shareholders are willing for a more sustainable return. Effectively, back to academia, a more sustainable return has a higher valuation as well. So people need to understand that it's a matter of, the less risk embedded, because you're more sustainable, technically speaking, you're less risky as well. Not from a financial per se aspect of it, but there's less deviation of what your outcome is going to be, hence sustainable.
Yeah.
When people start understanding that how all this comes together, and those that allocate capital start pushing for that because they themselves need to report. And if I may just take a little bit more of your time, I was speaking because we're a listed company as well. So we have shareholders. And I think one of the most, one of the biggest wake-up calls for me at least, was at a point where we're talking one of the biggest asset managers in the world. Yeah, they have a position in us. And we're talking about ESG. And they told us that they cannot even get to the second round of an RFP to manage institutional mandates if they do not have a proven process of incorporating ESG in their investment decision process. So when it comes to the matter of those that have capital, seek sustainability. For those that demand capital, they have no other choice but to start embedding and taking that upon themselves. So talking about the legislation with regards to the G, yes, the legislation is there, but there was a series of legislation already in place. So it's just a matter, it's a huge wake-up call for everybody to understand that it's not about ticking boxes. It's to really make it part of your DNA. So it's a very highly strategic initiative, as Christos, I think, mentioned, and Hub and Maria mentioned, and it needs to be coming from the top.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting you say that. I was reading a McKinsey report, 2017 report, actually, which had classified the companies of the world into the short-termists and the long-termists. And they were making this analysis showing that the long-termists outperform the short-termists in many financial indices at the end of the day. So yes, legislation, I'm not sure where we all stand on this, but it brings me to another question that I don't know who wants to address it. It's addressed to all of you. You're thinking about the EU Green Deal, which is said to inspire a legislative firestorm in a way. I mean, this is a 1 trillion investment by the EU and aims, among other things, to create a carbon neutral Europe by 2050. And many other things. In your case, Christos, it involves the farm to fork strategy and plan that addresses the agricultural sector. So where do you stand with this firestorm, legislative firestorm that is coming? Who would like to pick up on that? Yes? Yes, Christos.
Recently, we saw the European Green Deal. We learned about new words, farm to fork strategy, biodiversity strategy. All these things happened the last few months. I think that climate change, or maybe COVID, I don't know, is like to be the greatest threat of the 21st century. So this is a fact, and we should all force ourselves as humans and as industries also to make everything we can do in order to mitigate and adapt to the current situation. Now, I think that I believe that this is the only way forward. Farm to fork strategy and biodiversity strategy also is a very promising strategy, which is one of the least until now that actively takes the foods industries and the consumers' opinion into consideration. A few weeks ago, me and my colleagues, we were participating in the Farm to Fork conference, an EU conference organized by the European Union, which was an open discussion among UN and EU decision makers, and also public authorities, customers, and executives about this new strategy, the Farm to Fork and the biodiversity strategy. I hope that the implementation of this strategy, because it is very, very crucial, and I don't know when will take place this strategy, but the implementation will bring legislative changes and maybe some funding opportunities for our farmers, because it's not so easy to make this transition from the way that they cultivate now to the new one, to a more fairer, to more healthier, to a more environmentally and friendly way of cultivation. And just keep in mind that being a farmer is a very, very challenging job. And the toughest work is to talk to farmers about F2F strategy, about the farm to fork strategy. So it is very crucial. Of course, it's very, very important for all of us. It's not only for farmers, but also for us as a people, because the new strategy is conducted by people not from the Directorate Generale of Agriculture, but from Directorate Generale of Health. The same as happened with the Common Agricultural Policy. The new Common Agricultural Policy talking about food and not so much about farmers.
Yeah.
So
everything is interconnected in the new world.
And one word about what I said before about CSR and sustainability. In my mind comes that CSR, let's say, is the treatment and sustainability is the prevention. So we have to choose. Okay. What do we want, treatment or prevention?
Okay. So who's next? Maria, you want to go next? You have to unmute yourself. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. It's more than almost 30 years and a little bit more that we are talking both about CSR and what it is and about sustainable development and what it is. Allow me to say that a stepping stone was in 2015 when finally 193 countries, including all EU member states, signed up the Paris Agreement on climate change and of course the 17 common sustainable development goals for 2030. The European policy actually for sustainable finance, the new Green Deal, are all tools that the European Union adopts to meet these sustainable development goals. And it's not only European Union, allow me to say. I had the privilege to sit in a panel 2 weeks ago with the next Executive General, let's say the CEO of IMF, and he was telling in this panel about his positive experience on how Asian countries, including China and Japan and other emerging but developing markets rapidly, have embraced the agenda of SDGs 2030, and they are building up to a more sustainable pathway. It's for sure that each one of us is different. We have a different culture as companies, as nations, and each one has to do it in its own way. The same goes for companies. Companies have a culture and they have to make it their own way. The truth is that we do have to make it. There is no other way to go. We have either to achieve the goals or to put ourselves at stake. Our existence is at stake. And no company, allow me to say, can flourish, neither small nor medium size, nor large, neither multinationals like the big multinationals. No one can really flourish and grow in a society that is collapsing. So we have to save ourselves and society, and there are 17 goals, and they are all interweaved together, and that's what it is about. We live in Europe, we benefit from the European policy, and we are here to join forces and work together to make it happen. That's the reason that I would like to thank Lida for joining us together in this panel today.
Well, I'm in the UK, you know, which is not exactly Europe anymore, but
it's within the continent, actually. So we are one continent, and that's what is expressed also by the European Union agenda, but also by the UN agenda. If we read the 17 goals, we realize that we are all one. So we have to be all together in this.
Yes, Maria, you're right. Hub.
Look, my view is that I think governments and businesses both have a very important role to play. I think we do need more regulation from the government side. I think, for instance, we need carbon taxes urgently. I think this is something that companies can do a lot by themselves, but if you want to have a level playing field and internalize external cost, certainly when it comes to carbon, it's very important that we have appropriate carbon taxes so that the external cost of climate change are internalized. Another area where the governments need to act with regulation is setting certain standards. I mean, we talk about sustainability all the time, but it is a very vague concept, and we do need certain standards so that we can measure and can compare. So I think this is the role for governments, and I'm pro-regulation very much in that area, in those areas, also for social standards, by the way. But businesses have a role to play as well. And I know that businesses from large to small can make a huge difference and need to go beyond minimum standards. Also because consumers want businesses to do that. And so it's in business' own interest to offer better products, treat their workers well, treat the supply chain well, have high environmental standards, because that ultimately will lead to better products. And therefore, consumers will prefer those products, and it will be in the business interest. Because let's also not forget, this is not about charity. This is about doing business in a long-term sustainable way. And it can only be sustainable if it's profitable. Let's face it as well. So that's my view on these things.
Yeah, you're right. I think we're reaching towards the end of the session, and we would like to take some questions from the audience as well. So let me finish this Q&A session by asking a very brief question to each one of you, which really requires a very short answer, almost a yes or no answer. So if I may start with Maria, do you see companies adapting to change sooner than they did, let's say, 10 years ago when we were all dealing with CSR? Do you see change coming sooner to companies or not?
Yes, I do. I think by 2025, not by 2030, we will have seen and experienced a tremendous change within European Union and beyond. I truly believe that. Yeah. We can dream of that, but the pace will accelerate. A key driver is consumption. Another serious driver is not only 40 trillion euros represented by the investor community. The signatories to PRI represent 103 trillion US dollars. So really, it is happening, and it will really accelerate the coming years.
Yeah, you almost replied to the question I had to Nick. Will capital ultimately change the world towards a more sustainable future? Do you believe that?
Yeah, because let's I get the point that Hub made about the government needing more regulation and stuff, but it might be stakeholder capitalism, but it's capitalism nonetheless. So the allocation of capital, and I think as the younger generations that are much more aware of these, and these are much more closer to their DNA, and they seek these sustainability attributes in their products, where they work. So I think just the allocation of capital, whether it's monetary or human capital, like if you're a company that has not endorsed, has not abided with it, you have a problem to raise capital and even attract human capital. Okay. So speaking about sustainability, so yes, I think the markets, whether it's the financial markets or the market forces, I think are already making their mark.
Okay. Thank you. And Christos, is the COVID pandemic a drawback or a push forward for sustainability in the agricultural sector?
For sure, it's something that will continue, something that we'll work on. I think that now, since half of our human mankind is dealing with the COVID, seems to be strong, and a virus that seems not to be linked to the destruction of biodiversity, I think it's the right time to focus on sustainability. And we need to continue doing our homework and putting it in practice, even if we digitalize more of our processes. And in my opinion, when there is a will, there is always a way. So we should find this way to act sustainably. And what I'm talking about sustainable, I will say it once more. Everyone from us, everyone in a company or as a person should act sustainably. Not only the CSR department of one team, everyone. It's something strategically.
Okay. And Hub, legislation or self-regulation to get sustainability going?
I've been long enough in the corporate world to know that legislation is necessary, but I think you at the same time have a role for companies, leading companies to go beyond legislation. So I think you need a combination of both. But legislation is needed to ensure a level playing field and ensure that you have no free riders.
Okay. Let's turn to, we can take, I think, 2 questions. We've got more than that, but let's take 2 questions. The first question is whether there are any mechanisms to support the implementation of the farm to fork strategy. Christos, I guess this is for you. And I'll just say the second question and address it to the panelists. The second question is, do you believe that companies are genuinely interested in applying ESG practices, or just do so because it is something that they need to tick a box to? I think this is more for you, Nick. So, Christos, would you like to start with the first one?
Yes. I realized that sometimes there is a big gap between Brussels and Athens, for example, between Brussels and Rome, or between Brussels and Madrid, because the state members of the European Union, they legislate differently than they are forced, let's say, from Brussels. So let's hope that in our country, in Greece, since I'm Greek, they will act immediately. They have all the knowledge, they have all the information from the Brussels, from the farm to fork strategy and the biodiversity strategy, and they will implement the strategy in our country. But as I told you, even European Union can form such a kind of strategy. The great responsibility is to the local and the state members, and especially the ministers of agriculture.
Okay. Nick, would you like to take the other one?
Yeah, can you repeat it, please?
Yeah, whether ESG is applied or endorsed just for ticking the box, or is it something that companies really invest into?
Do companies make money to tick the box? It's
yeah.
I think it's, as is with the financial reporting, okay, as is with financial reporting, if you just operate in a way to maximize your bottom line at all costs, at some point that's going to break. And the market is very, very smart. Like the collective smartness of the market, the collective intelligence of the market picks up on these attributes, and you tend to underperform, and then you tend to be isolated. I think the same thing happens with ESG, will happen with ESG as collective thinking becomes a lot more comfortable with all these metrics and understand in the core the relevance of adopting sustainability metrics in the investment decision process. The same amount of scrutiny will go, as has been historically the cases with, uncovering financial shenanigans. It's the same thing. If you get to a company that just ticks the boxes on ESG, it's a matter of time for that to collapse as a house of cards. Mm-hmm. So then it's up to corporate choice. If the board of directors or senior management endorse that kind of strategy, well, then, as is the case with financial reporting, if you endorse a fraudulent behavior, well, then you are taking on the risk of having extremely adverse results.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, there are more questions coming, but I'm afraid that we will go out of our schedule, that we wouldn't want to do that. being based in Britain. So I think that this is an appropriate point to end our webinar. We'll try and answer the rest of the questions in written and send you the replies from the panelists. I would like to really thank the speakers for the intelligence and eloquence with which they contributed to the conversation today. Most of all, I would like to thank all the participants for attending our webinar. The recording will be available on our website, www.whitestrategy.com, and of course on our social media. Thank you, and stay tuned for the next one. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye, Lida.